All right, in chapter 12 that we studied about last week, we ended up with a section in there of telling us that we need to love our brethren and that we can't take vengeance. Now then, in chapter 13, the civil government for this work. So chapter 13 is just a follow-up of chapter 12 and an explanation of this very thing. Now, when we look at something that's kind of interesting, we learn that three great institutions were created by God. First of all, in the Garden of Eden, He instituted the family, and then He gave us the government, and then He gave us the church and the kingdom. And these are three divinely ordained institutions that God has Himself set up in this world. Now, when we get to look at the government, and that's what we're going to be dealing with tonight in chapter 13, let us note here in Romans 13 it says, "For rulers are not a terror to the good work, but to the evil. He," or it, the government. Now, let me make this clear. You might say, why are you changing that he to it? In the Greek, the third person singular, the he, she, or it. In English, we say he, she, or it. In the Greek, really, it's all the same thing. And so, just like it is in English, really, so you can say either he or it. So it depends on what you're talking about. Now, he's talking about the government here, and he says, it is. And the translators have put in he. So it is a correct translation, but it would be better translated really for it. For it is a minister of God to thee for good. It beareth not the sword in vain. It is a minister of God, an avenger for wrath to him that doeth evil. So here in the New Testament we find that the government is set up by God. In the Old Testament, we're all familiar with what Daniel said. Daniel talking to King Nebuchadnezzar when he became a rebellious man. And he said, "The kingdom is departed from thee, and thou shalt be driven from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. Thou shalt be made to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will." So King Nebuchadnezzar was punished until he learned God rules in the kingdom of men. God gives it to whomsoever he will. In Titus we learn, put them in mind to be subjection to rulers, to authorities, to be obedient, to be ready unto every good work. Again, Peter says, be subject to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. Notice here, it's not just for man's sake, but we are to obey the laws of the land for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme or unto governors as set by him, for vengeance on evildoers, and for praise to them that do the same. So the New Testament teaches that the government is set up by God and that our job is to obey it. Paul tells Timothy, he said, "I exhort you, first of all, supplication, prayers, intercessions, thanksgiving be made for all men, for kings, and all that are in high place, that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all goodness and gravity." So we are to pray for the rulers of our lands, regardless of who they are, regardless of whether we agree with them or not, so that we might be able to live that quiet life with all godliness and gravity. Now, as we're introduced to chapter 13, everybody knows chapter 13 follows chapter 12. But here is a problem we have today. One of the greatest things that man has done to help us to understand the Bible is to divide it into books and chapters. Not into books, but into chapters and verses. This wasn't done for about 1,500 years after the Bible was completed. And I'm amazed at how well it was done. Now, it's done in this way so that we can know better where to turn to a passage and where to find it. But here's the impression that we get some 500-600 years later. This was done in the 1500s. And so here we are now, 15, 20, or 5 to 10 years later then. We are here and we get the impression chapter 12 is about one thing, chapter 13 is about another thing, and when we see these breaks, why we kind of get that impression that the subject has been changed. And especially since in our teaching We try to take chapters and we try to read verses and so forth, but a lot of times it made division. So what I've put up here is, I want you to note that had you been reading it in Paul's writing, in the letter that he sent to them, there wouldn't have been any chapter break, and he, in chapter 12, would have been talking about, avenge not yourselves, vengeance belongeth unto me, I will recompense, saith the Lord. And he goes on down telling them this, and then chapter 13 just continues on. Let every soul be in subjection to higher power, for there is no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God. For rulers are not a terror to the good work, but to the evil. For he or it, the government, is a minister of God to thee for good. For he or it is a minister of God, an avenger of wrath to him that doeth evil. So here we come into this avenger again. So God has set up civil governments to take vengeance. Civil government has its purpose in God's mind. God wanted a family to raise children. He wanted the church, his kingdom, for salvation. But he wants civil government so that the family and the church can exist in this life and do good without all the chaos that would come if civil government wasn't in place. It has been said and agreed, I think, by all men of all times, that any government that you can think of is really better than no government at all. Now, when you look at Saddam Hussein and you think, boy, how could a government be worse than that? Well, all you got to do is to look now at the followers that's trying to set up that government, what's called the insurgents, and you can see what they do. Which would you rather live under? Would you rather live under those guys that have no government at all, they don't recognize any government, or would you rather live under Saddam? See, I would take Saddam 10,000 to 1 would be a better situation. And even the Caesars, as bad as they were, if you don't have civil government, it's hard for man to think what this world would be like. It would be total chaos because every person would be doing what they wanted to do. Okay? What they wanted to do. It doesn't make any difference about anybody else. If they want something, they then would just go out and get it. So civil government is ordained of God to keep that from happening. But as we begin tonight, let us note chapter 13 follows chapter 12, and we're right in the middle of vengeance. And so now we're going to see tonight the purpose of civil government, why God set it up so it can take people here. So now, Romans 13, a subject here about civil government. Let's start reading, and we're going to define these words. The chapter is pretty simple to understand. I'm going to give the scholarly definition from Thayer's lexicon and so forth from these words. Let every soul be in subjection to the higher powers. Now, the word subjection means to arrange under, subordinate, or obey. Now, I suppose that the people who have been in the armed forces are the people who better understand this word than anybody. Because what you do is you go in and you spend the first 13 weeks in basic training. And that first 13 weeks in basic training has one purpose. Now, you do a whole lot of things, but everything is geared for one purpose. And that one purpose is to learn the meaning of that word. That's what it is. And what it is to take your mind away and replace it with the mind of the authorities that are over you. Now, it's not total, because you're not to break laws if one of your captains or lieutenants or somebody tells you to go out and break a civil law. You're not supposed to do that. If they tell you to kill somebody, you're not supposed to do that. But when they give you an order, the adage is, you're not paid to think, you're paid to do. Now, it takes about 13 weeks for that to break through. And it's one of the most, I wouldn't know how you would describe going through basic training. It's exhilarating. It's agitating, it's frustrating, it's horrible, it's the most confused, horrible situation that you ever find yourself in. But when you get through with that 13 weeks, you don't think, you just do. And when a superior comes and gives an order, you accept that order. Now, if the man is no good, you know he's a liar, you know he's a cheat, there are a lot of them like that, you're taught to recognize the uniform, recognize the bar on his shoulder, and you're to salute him, and you're to say yes, sir, and you're to pay respect, and you're to obey him. Not because he's such a fine man, but because of his rank. And it takes about 13 weeks, 24 hours a day, both day and night, and I literally mean day and night, in order to take a young man and break his mind so that he is willing to operate under those conclusions. Now, we can try to get around subjection any way that we want to, and say, oh, I think it means this, and I think it means that, but I would say go talk to anybody that's been in the armed services. That's what this word is talking about. It's a word that has to do with the subjection in the Army. So now, arrange yourself under. Put yourself under. When a policeman stops you, when anybody comes with authority, remember, it's the government, and God has ordained that government. You might know the person is a liar, a cheat, but that doesn't make any difference. You are doing this in your respect to God. So now, let every subject be in subjection to the higher powers. Means authority. There are different words. There are, in fact, 3 Greek words that mean power. But one of them is that word we're familiar with, means dynamite. And it is that you have a lot of, you have power residing within you. There's another one that means strong, that you just are a strong individual in there. And then there's another one that's authority, that you might not even be able to walk. You might have lost both of your legs, and you're in a wheelchair, and you're a paraplegic. And if you have that authority, that's what this is. When you speak, you have that authority. So now, to all these higher authorities, that's the king, the governors, whatever it is that is in there. Then he goes ahead to say, for the higher powers, for there is no power, there is no authority, there's no government, there's no king, there's nobody but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God. Now the word ordained literally means that which has been arranged, thing placed in order. Now every Sunday, Dan has placed in order who'll lead prayer, who'll wait on the Lord's table, who'll come out. They sit here, they sit here. Everything has been assigned. They go to the back room, they go over it. Each man, they don't just come out and sit down out here somewhere like this. Each man knows where it's to be because it has been assigned. They have been ordained. That's what the word ordained means. It means set in order, placed in a certain order. Now, God has placed every government in order. Now, this is where you can come up with a lot of questions that I can't answer, because we're talking about a situation that I have no authority over, and God hasn't conferred with me and asked me any questions about it. And that is, there's a lot of them, like how you run the universe. God holds everything. Jesus Christ holds everything in its place by the power of His Word. How's He do that? I don't know, but He does that. Now, He has ordained every government. Now, you might say, well, what about the communist governments? What about Saddam Hussein? Yeah, every government has been set in place by God. Now, that doesn't mean that every person ruling, every king ruling that government is a righteous, godly government. And you say, well, do you think that God specifically raises up a specific man? I don't know. I don't know. But I know that God gives every country a government. And we do know what God does when governments rise up and kings take control and they are wicked and they're not obedient. What have we learned in our Old Testament studies that God does? What did God do to Nebuchadnezzar? God will remove them. So God removes a government, He sets up another government. Just like churches are ordained of God. But is every church a pure, wholesome, non-sinning church? Elders are ordained of God. But is every elder a truly God-fearing, righteous man? No. But there are ways of removal in all of these various things. So, what he's saying here, he's not trying to look at the details. Well, what about this or what about that? Every government, wherever you find yourself, he says, you be obedient to that government. 2, therefore, he that resisteth the power, resist the power, or resist the authority, means that you're set up to battle against, to oppose oneself, to resist. It means that you're leading the demonstrations to overthrow the government. Don't become the person that is out there trying to overthrow that government. Again, you come to a lot of questions, and that is, how was America set up? Did these people overthrow the government that they were under? Yeah. Well, are we the beneficiaries of the most wonderful governments that's ever known on the face of the earth? Yeah. How do we get that way? Because of the sacrifice they paid for us? Then you say, well, isn't that a good thing? We're the beneficiaries of a lot of things. Every one of us is a beneficiary of many good things that other people have done, and we're the beneficiary of many evil things that other people have done. And so just because somebody before you has done something either good or evil, and you either have been blessed by it or you been cursed by it, doesn't mean that you have a right to do the same thing. So don't try to overthrow the government. Then it says, therefore he that resisteth the power withstandeth the ordinance of God, and they that withstand the ordinance of God shall receive to themselves judgment. So that word means a disposition, arrangement, or an ordinance. Now, if sometimes they call a legal document a disposition, that this disposition has been set out. This is the idea here. It's a certain arrangement. It is a law. Now, what you generally have is this: that you'll have a law here in the city of Monroe that says something about taking care of streets. Then under that, you'll have 35 different ordinances. That is, 35 are set in place under that particular thing. That's what this is talking about. Here that when you resist the ordinance or the laws that are there, you're really resisting God. So we need to keep that in mind. We are resisting God. When God sets an authority in place, God wants us to be obedient to that authority. And when we resist, we are resisting God. And then he said, now the word judgment, Thayer says, means condemnation of wrong. The sentence of God as a judge, of where God will render the sentence, you will be held responsible for resisting the ordinance, the law, the authority that God has set forth. Then he says, for rulers are not a terror to the good work, but to the evil. And wouldest thou have, that's the authority, do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise from the same. Now, this is really the purpose of the government that's here. If you don't want to fear the government, if you don't want to be afraid of the government, all you do is do good. You'll be obedient. You do good. If you don't, then you're going to have to fear. But if you do good, then you'll have praise from the government. In verse 4, for he or it is a minister of God to thee for good. So here we have he, the government, is a minister. Here's that word that used for everyone. Jesus was a minister, apostles were ministers, preachers were ministers, all members of the church are ministers, elders are ministers, deacons are ministers. And what that word minister really means, I think it's kind of interesting, is the etymology. When you go back to the very beginning, it means raising dust by hastening. One who executes the commands of another, a servant or a minister. And so it comes from the idea that when an authority gives a person raises the dust in running to obey that order. And that's where we get the word minister or servant. By the way, this is the same word as the word for deacon in the church here. Now, this minister that we're talking about now, and I want you to notice in verse 4, it says, for he, it, is a minister of God, an avenger for wrath to him that doeth evil. There is his ministering job. There is his work. The civil government's work is to punish the evildoer, to keep control of the country, to keep peace in the country, so that the ones who do good, happy, tranquil, and peaceful lives, and the civil government is God's tool, God's minister to make sure that this takes place. Now, deacons are ministers in the church. They are ones who raise the dust in doing what they ordered to do, and of course they would be servants of the bishops, the overseers of the church. So that word minister means a servant that's there. So civil government is a minister of God. Now, he goes on here and he says this, do that which is evil, be afraid, for he, the government, beareth not the sword in vain. That is, as we'd say today, they don't have that 45 on their hip for nothing. It's there to be used. For he is a minister of God, an avenger for wrath to him that doeth evil. Wherefore, ye must needs be in subjection, not only because of the wrath, so don't obey the government just because you're afraid you'll get in trouble if you don't obey the government, but also for conscience sake. That is your own conscience, because you know that God has set up the government, and you know that you should be obedient to the government. 6, for this cause ye pay tribute also, for they are ministers of God's servants, attending continually upon this very thing. So now, because of this very thing, because they're ministers of wrath to the evil, and they will brag on you if you're good, you pay tribute. Now that word tribute means local taxes. That means property taxes. How many tributes do we have in America? How many different kind of taxes are there? Hundreds of them, secretly hidden in and there, and so I guess the property tax is about the most obvious, because you do get a statement each year and saying here's what you're going to be paying. But that's the idea of tribute. Now, he says that's the reason you pay taxes. When the people came to Jesus, the Jews came to Jesus, the Romans were holding them in subjection. They hated that so terribly bad. And they said, should we pay taxes? What was Jesus' answer, you remember? Yeah. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. So, pay your taxes. Now then, Paul is coming along, and what Paul say about paying your taxes? Yeah, pay your taxes. There's a purpose for paying taxes. Now, let me ask you this. Does everybody in here feel like our tax system is really fair, and you're paying what you should be paying, and it's being spent in carefully in doing what he says here? It's a man of life. They're throwing it away faster than we can give it to them. It's a terrible thing, you see, that they do in so many ways. But again, that's not our purpose. Now, if we have an opportunity to change it and make it better, we should do it. But our job is to pay taxes, and the job of the government is to offer us protection. And when it becomes so totally corrupt that it's no longer fit to be saved, whose job is it to remove the government? Then it's God's job to remove the government. So I think what we see in here is the balance of where we as Christians need to fit in, as we're wondering what in the world really should we do. You know, there's a good statement that I think I can make. I make it anyway, and I think I'll make it so you check on it. You say, what can you do? What can you do in relationship to the government? It's serving the government. The government tells you to do something. What can you do? Now, whatever your answer is, it has to come out to this. Whatever you can do here in America, a Russian can do in the government of Russia. Or the people in a Muslim community could do if you as a Christian lived over there, what could you do? In other words, the way that you measure things is, can I do this? Can I do that? See, can we do this? Well, could you do it if you were in another country? And a lot of times you find that yourself in a contradiction. You'll say, no, if I was over there, I don't believe I could do it. But if I was over here, I think I could do it. The whole point is, obey your government. And, of course, there's one obvious exception to that the New Testament gives us back in Acts 4. What is it? When is it you say, I will not obey? When it's a violation of God's law. That's when Peter said, shall we obey God rather than men? See? And so you must obey God rather than men. Okay, so pay your tribute. And they also then are these ministers of God's servant in here. Render to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom. So here now is the word, your tariffs. This means taxes between countries. This means that if you order goods from another country, why, they'll slap some extra taxes on that. And so you pay your taxes. And then fear to whom fear. There's a word that means fear, dread, or terror. And then in a good sense, it could mean reverence and respect. Now, if you have it's hurricane season. If you were down there would you have any terror, dread, fear? You would, wouldn't you? Now, would you have any respect for that power that's coming in? Would you kind of stand in awe of it in there? And so if you have that fear, you're going to have respect for that power that's coming in, and it's going to cause you to do what is right. And so fear, whom fear is due. The higher authorities that have the power of putting you in jail or of killing you or doing whatever they want to do. Fear them. Stand in terror. Show respect in this. And honor is due. Now, honor means a thing prized for high value. You have a lot of things in your house that are of honor and a lot of things that are of dishonor. And you say, what is the difference? Well, one of them may cost you 35 cents. And all it does is collect dust. And you'd say, well, what's it worth? Nothing. You want to take this home with you? It's a thing of dishonor. What do you mean? It means you don't put a high price on that. Then there are other things that you put a high price on. That if that child comes to your house and runs over and picks it up, you might jump and run and rescue it. Oh, no, don't do this, because it is a thing of honor. That means it has a high price to you. So people, those who deserve to be honored, then you honor them. So he said, there's your obligation. You leave the vengeance up to God. Don't you take it yourself. God has government. He works with his government. It's all in control, and you obey God, and everything then, he says, is going to turn out fine. The next section, as we move on in chapter 13, is on love. It's kind of an interesting thing. He said, owe no man anything save to love one another. So, owe no man anything, which means always pay all your debts, is what it means. It doesn't mean you can't take a loan out to buy a house. If you take a loan out to buy a house, loan you $300,000, and the first of every month, why, this much is due. Now, if you pay that on the first of the month, do you owe them? No, you don't owe them anything. Not until it becomes due again. And then you pay it. You don't owe them anything. That's the thing that it's talking about here, is pay your debts when the debts become due. So don't owe any man anything. Don't cheat anybody out of anything, save or except one thing. Now here's one thing you can never pay off. There's only one exception. That exception is one debt that can never be paid. Doesn't make any difference what you do, you can never get it paid off. It's a debt that's always with you, every minute of every day. It's love. That's the one debt that we owe everybody that we can never pay. So now then, he shows us what this is. What do you mean by love then? It says, for he that loveth his neighbor hath fulfilled the law. So if this word love is so big that if you love your neighbor, you love one another, you fulfilled all the laws that God's given. You fulfilled them all in there. Now love is composed of two things as we look at it. Love has a negative aspect. Love has a positive aspect. Now the positive aspect is one that we generally give. Love is an attitude that causes one to always act in the best interest of the object that you love. The negative is love is an attitude that causes one to never act against the best interest of the object loved. And Paul is going to deal with both of these. Jesus said, and a second is likened to this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments, the first one is loving God, the whole law hangeth and the prophets. Now what he means by that is, every law that God has given, 100% of the laws that God has given can be summarized in two things. Acting in the best interest of God, or it's acting in the best interest of your fellow man. Those two things. Every law. Count them all up, regardless of how many hundreds there are that you find in the Bible. Every one of them, Jesus said, falls under one of those two categories. Paul said, love fulfills the law. Love takes care of everything else. Thy neighbor as thyself, we're told. And when this is the measuring stick. How do you know that you really love? You use yourself as the measuring standard. You love your neighbor as yourself. How would I want somebody else to act toward me if the roles were reversed? How would I want that to be? Am I acting toward somebody in a way that I would not want them to act toward me? There is the infallible guide that you always write. Even in husbands loving their wives. How do you do that? As your own body. And when you do it, you're always right. When I say, how would I want Helen to act toward me if it were reversed? I have no problem knowing what I should do. None whatsoever. None. Because it's 100%. I want my own body to be cared for and treated in a nice way. Jesus said, all things, therefore, whatsoever you would that men do unto you, even so do ye also unto them, for this is the law and the prophets. So he said, there's your standard. You operate on that standard, and you'll never go wrong. 1 Corinthians 13 gives us both of these. I'm not going to take time to read them, but if you'll look there. Over here, the positive in 1 Corinthians 13. Love suffereth long, is kind, rejoiceth with truth, beareth all things, believeth all things. There's positive. And then in 1 Corinthians 13 he says, love envieth not, vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up. There's your negatives. Love does one thing, love does not do another thing. That's what Paul is teaching, that you've got these two aspects of it here. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, and if there be any other commandment, it is summed up in this word, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Let me ask you a quick question. You give me a real quick answer. Why can't I commit adultery? It's just because God said so? God said I can't, so I can't? Why can't I commit adultery? Well, why can't I steal? What is wrong with stealing? It's hurting my neighbor, isn't it? What's wrong with adultery? Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. It's hurting the person I commit it with. It's hurting my spouse. That's what's wrong. That's the reason God says you can't do it. God says every commandment I tell you is based on the fact of not hurting somebody else. And then he sums all these things up. He said, love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Love, therefore, is the fulfillment of the law. So there you have it. Every command of God is fulfilled in that. Chapter verses 11 through 14 to finish out the chapter. And this could be said, awake out of your sleep, because salvation is nearer every day. Now, he starts out and he says, and this, knowing the season that already it is time for you to awake out of sleep, for now is salvation nearer to us than when we first believed. Have you had to do it to your kids or spouse or somebody? You overslept, you're going to be late for work, somebody busts your bedroom. Hurry up, wake up, you need to get going. That's what he's saying. Why would anybody bust in your bedroom and say, hurry, get up now, go? Why would they do that? Instead of just coming in and saying, hey, you ready to get up today? One is you have an obligation that you must meet out there, don't you? And it's an emergency. Now, every one of us has an obligation that we must meet. You talk about getting to work late, you think about dying before you're ready to die. You think about meeting your God before you have really made your life right with God. This is what he's saying. The season is past for sin and nonsense. It's time to wake up. Salvation is nearer than it was when we first believed. I want us to take just a moment. I want to take 10 seconds without saying anything. There's 10 seconds. That means you and I are 10 seconds closer to meeting our God on the judgment day than we were before I did that. 10 seconds. When you get up tomorrow, you're going to be another 8 or 10 hours closer. When we meet here next Wednesday, you're going to be 7 days closer to your death and meeting your God. And you might say, well, we all won't die at the same time. I didn't say we were. I'm just saying you, every person, every one of us, we're 7 days closer this week than what we were last week. What did we do these 7 days? That's what he's saying. Wake up. It's time to wake up and do what's right. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. So the Bible always uses darkness or evil, and The night's gone. The day's coming. It's time to get up and go to work, is what he's saying. It's time for us to quit lollygagging around. It's time for us to start really doing what God would have us to do. Let us walk becomingly. The word walk, let us live in this life becomingly. That word literally means in a seemly manner or decently. Then he explains what it is. As in the day and not reveling. Reveling, Thayer says, usually is generally a feast and drinking parties that are protected late at night and indulge in revelry. Just going out on these drinking parties. And not in chambering. The word chamber means bedroom. Chambering means in bed. It's the word that they used for illicit sexual relations. And wantonness. Wantonness. Thayer gives all these words. Unbridled lust. That's probably the clearest. Unbridled lust. That is a lust that you have that doesn't have any bridle to it. What does it mean, unbridled? What's a bridle for? It's to control, isn't it? And so it's lust that's out of control, that you don't have any control about. Excess. That's another word. Going to the excess of things. Lasciviousness. Can't even say that one. Forget it. And so you look at all of those. He gives all of them. These are just horrible things that's in here. And then he said strife. That means to wrangle, engage in strife, being a troublemaker. And jealousy. Jealousy means to burn with zeal, moved with envy, hatred, and anger. That word jealousy is kind of an interesting word. It's a good word. It's a bad word. What about hate, by the way? Is hate good or bad? Is lust good or bad? Well, it depends, you see, on how they're used. Jealousy, is it good or bad? It depends. It means, the idea means to burn with zeal. So we ought to burn with zeal to protect our families and to serve the Lord. But it also means moved with envy. You burn with zeal, your envy, your hatred, your anger. You got these things in you. He said, it's time to get rid of them. The season's past. The night is over. You're closer to the judgment day. Whenever it is. I don't know when it'll be. As Rick Capelli is telling about his 38-year-old niece or somebody dropped dead last week. Nobody was expecting it. On and on you go. Ball sitting on the back pew. Not too long ago, the doctors told him if he hadn't been in the operating room, he would have been dead. Wow. You get to thinking, is my life right with God? That's what Paul is saying. You make sure that it is. And then he says, make no provisions to fulfill the lust thereof. That word provision literally means forethought. Don't take any forethought. Don't make any plans of fulfilling your lustly desires. Anything that you do that's wrong, make sure it's a mistake. Make sure you stumble. Make sure it's not a planned situation. Make sure that we determine we will serve our God with all the ability that we possibly have. And so with that, he closes chapter 13. Now, seconds, look at chapter 14. But, now then he's going to continue really on. Him that is weak in faith receive thee, yet not for decision of scruples. Now in chapter 14, he's going to talk about how strong Christians should treat weak Christians. There are weak Christians that have a horrible time of breaking these things and coming out of this and being the kind of people that they ought to be. And how should we get along? Because there's always the strong Christians and always the weak Christians. And always questions about should I or shouldn't I. So that's what chapter 14 will be about. Okay, class dismissed.